I would like to introduce JD Faccinetti. JD is the president and founder of the Pituitary World News, which was established in 2014 with collaboration of Dr. Louis Blevins, with the sole purpose of helping reduce the time of diagnosis of pituitary diseases by creating Pituitary World News website to bring education and knowledge in a line new style magazine publications. Working with pituitary specialists and endocrinologists and healthcare professionals throughout the world and pituitary patients affected by pituitary disorders. Please welcome JD on his presentation on Pituitary World News, importance of awareness and collaboration with the specialists and patients in Canada. Welcome.
Well, hello everyone. I have to tell you, I just had laser surgery, so I'm trying to get used to my new eyes, so I have to... But anyway, the JD, my name is Jorge Faccinetti, actually. So if you hear an accent, I'll explain where it comes. I was born in Argentina. I came to the US when I was a youngster. My mother was Scottish and my dad was Italian. So that's how I ended up with a Spanish first name and an Italian last name. And I explain it because everybody asks me. So there it is. So my presentation, I wanted to spend a little time talking about Pituitary World News. We started Pituitary World News with the idea of increasing awareness of pituitary disease. When you hear the stories, and we heard Dr. Aza and Dr. Azat discuss today the issue of diagnosis. I'm the perfect example, and when I was diagnosed after 28 years of being missed, it occurred to me, one, that once you see the disease, you can't miss it. And two, that there has to be something done to try to decrease the time it takes to diagnosis. And my background was in communications and marketing research. So I grew up in the old style advertising agencies of New York City. I worked for some of the big ones, and then I moved to California and worked for some other firms in San Francisco and did a lot of work for nonprofit. So when Dr. Blevins came to me and we sat down over a cup of coffee and said, well, what would you do? They knew what my skills were. What would you do? I said, well, maybe we need to start a magazine. And what kind of magazine? Well, we think it should be kind of like the Huffington Post of pituitary disease, a blog where things are interesting. It's a platform for collaboration, to do news aggregation, which means we take things that have been published and show people where they are, where to find certain information. So I invite you all, if you haven't seen it, to look at it. I was delighted today to have this morning's presenter mention Pituitary World News, because what's happening is that since we've started the publication in 2014, it has grown tremendously. And I'm going to show you a little bit about where we reach and how we do it. But I wanted to also talk about ideas, because which one is the green one, right? So we think that, or I believe that the path to great ideas is about asking the right questions. So when we said, okay, it's about increasing awareness, that's an idea, but it's just too broad. What do you do with awareness? Awareness is important, but if you don't have a plan and you don't have a specific question that's driving that, you just end up all over the world. So noise for noise sake doesn't work anymore. The airways are too cluttered. Social media is cluttered, as you can see. You can Google acromegaly and get 3-5 million hits on the web. It's information, it's all over the place. It's totally disorganized, and unfortunately today, some of it is great and some of it is junk, and most of it is misinformation. So we're dealing with that on top of everything else, which is not just, the medical literature. The world is dealing with that today. So it's sort of an adjustment we have to make. So the question that we asked ourselves was the question that the doctors talked about this morning, is how do we decrease the number of years it takes to reduce to diagnosis? How do we do that? And we thought that the answer to that was, well, awareness. Awareness is key. So if you have awareness, and then I'm going to show you a little matrix that we worked on that shows you how that, from awareness to engagement to results and how it works. The thing about asking, if I ask you for ideas, sometimes the easiest way to do it is to ask people, what's the question that deals to the idea? For example, many great companies were started on a question. There's the old story of the daughter of the founder of Polaroid, who was 7 years old, and asked her dad, why do we have to wait for a picture? No? So that question, it's in all of the business school publications, and it's a wonderful question. I had some experience with Nordstrom's, the department store, and the question they asked was, how do we use our marketing dollars differently than anybody else? And Nordstrom's was the first company in the world that said, we're going to do it with customer service. And they started taking back products that they didn't even sell. So if you bought a suit that didn't fit, you could go take it back, and there would no questions asked. Take it and get a new one. No questions asked. The story that everybody tells in the business school literature is about the lady that went to the Nordstrom's in Bellevue, Washington, and returned 4 tires. And they took the tires back, and they didn't say a word. So they decided that a good percentage of their budget was going to be no questions asked customer service. And they build a brand that is extremely successful today. They've had some issues, lately, but that happens with companies. And the last story I'll tell you about is a story that I had some experience with. One of my earliest jobs in the advertising industry was in New York with a company called NWR. And NWR had, if you remember, it was in the US, but had the Army recruiting account. And that was, at that time, one of the largest advertising budgets ever awarded. It was $160 million. I went to work with them in 1984, more or less. But the question they asked was, how do we get people to volunteer for the armed forces after Vietnam? And they had a tremendous amount of research on trying to answer that question. And that led to some very creative ways of dealing with problems if you define them with a question. So what I'm trying to tell you, it's not about the idea, it's how do you ask the question? Because if we have the right question, then we get creative people to deal with it and say, okay, what are the different ways we can do that? And the other part of my presentation is about collaboration, which is, it's not just us. No, this is a platform for, we call it innovation and collaboration. So we want everybody to get involved with us to see, and we want to hear your ideas. So this is what I'd like to do today, is to show you who we are, what we're doing today, and then invite you to work with us. And totally open. You can just reach me and say, hey, I think about this and that. What about this or what about that? I think if we get all involved, we can start generating enough awareness to make a difference. And the way, in my opinion, the way awareness works is, if people are aware that there's something called acromegaly, which I wasn't, and I'm considering myself, relatively well educated. And I would have been smart enough to ask my primary care physician, who was totally shocked, by the way, after 28 years that I had this. I would have been smart enough to focus his attention on some things because I had heard of it. He may have come to the conclusion much sooner than he did. And the same thing with the physician. I was in Los Angeles doing a presentation with Dr. Louis Blevins, my partner. We started this together. And there were 500 endocrinologists in the presentation at the American Society of Clinical Endocrinologists. I would tell you that a vast majority of them, I was the first acromegalic patient they had seen in there because of the questions we were getting after the presentation. So there is a tremendous need also to educate physicians. And I don't want to say the word educate because they're extremely well educated, but inform or present the information in a way that somebody's going to want to read it. So that's my thing. You have ideas. If you have ideas, let us know, and we want to work with them. We want to try to figure out a way to make your ideas happen. And in the world of creative thinking and creative development, you never know where the idea is going to come from. Some of the best ideas are just somebody that says something, and you say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's a great idea. We could just make it work." I've been lucky enough that I have met Deanna and Jill Sisko, who runs the acromegaly community, and we have a bunch of collaborators. So we have this team that's constantly working on how do we do this better. And we are a platform to get it out there. So how we do that? Okay, so this is our goal. Increase awareness so more people are diagnosed properly and early. And this is who we reach today. So today we have about 62% of our audience in the US, which is about 12% in the UK, Canada is 8%, and the rest of the world, about Australia, India, and then all the rest is about 18%. We get about to 1,800 to 2,500 hits a week at they're called unique sessions. So people come to the site. And this is the way they come to the website, about 55% mobile. The desktop is about 34%, tablet 10%. And what's really interesting is we get 60% of the traffic, if you look at it on a monthly basis, that it's new traffic versus 40% repeat. So what that says to me is that there's a vast world out there of people interested in pituitary, and we don't know who they are. I mean, all we have is an IP address. That's how we know. IP address is the address that your computer has that tells the internet that you're online. So we know that 40% already have visited, but there's about 60% that either they clean what's called the cookies or they use different computers. So that number may be lower, but it's a high enough number that leads me to believe that many people are not engaging. So one of the quick questions that I would like to pose to the group is, how do we get people to engage more? How do we get this group to be 600 instead of 150? So because we think, and we can't prove this, but my thought is that there's a vast majority out there that it's not engaging. And the way they behave with our site, they're coming to the site, they get the information, they download it. I know how long they stay. I know the pages they look at, but I have no idea what they do after that. So I would like to have a way to engage. And that's a very difficult thing because today, in the world of social media and all the internet mumbo-jumbo going on, I guess we call it, there's a lot of danger with that to people engaging. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. How do I go back? Red. There we go.
Yeah. So I think you implied here you're getting 10%. What's the denominator? So in other words, who are your competitors or possible allies?
Oh, where else they're going? You mean? It's a very good question. I'm not sure I know, but I think they're using everything. We show up as part of a particularly in the organic search, and I was going to talk a little bit about that. where I think we're getting into the show up top 4 or 5 on the list. So when people are looking for certain search terms, then we show up on the.
So I guess that's my question.
Yeah.
How do you derive the denominator? Is it that the denominator is composed of all those who search the pituitary?
Correct.
What about other terms such as pituitary, acromegaly, or any term that involves the pituitary? Because when people Google,
Yes.
okay, which I imagine is sort of the most common,
Yes.
they may go in and they say, what is acromegaly or Cushing,
Yeah.
whatever. So how do you establish a denominator so you can really have a better appreciation of who you're working against and potentially who you can work with to bring this together towards sort of a more unified approach?
Yeah. Well, we have a suspicion that people are searching many, many different. We know what the search terms are. So it depends on how we set the search engine optimization on the side, that certain keywords are going to show up when people search. So we're trying to get as broadly as possible because we want to reach possible people that have heard of it or interested that maybe have not been diagnosed. Our idea is that the broader we get, the more impact we can have. But obviously that has a budgetary constraint too, because it's very expensive to do that. So we're carefully doing that. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question. I don't know if I have the data to tell you that this is a percentage of all of the people that are searching for pituitary disease. I don't know that. But I know that most of our search terms, 90% of them are related to pituitary conditions. Pituitary tumors, pituitary disease, acromegaly specific. There's many, many search terms.
So it's quite likely that all your figures really are underestimating.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, totally. Thank you. Okay, so that's the way people are searching. 40% reach us through social media and 60% through organic search. Organic search is anybody that puts something on the site and it shows the Pituitary World News will show up together with everybody else and that's a competitive thing that we do to make sure that we show up faster and up so we get the eyeball on the side first.
So with this, what JD's trying to do is be able to help the pituitary patients because we can't get into Medscape or Endo Society or those type of places to read up on stuff because they're closed. So JD helps us with your knowledge and expertise of your information to be on the site so we as patients can get on there and learn more and have, information for understanding better when we're newly diagnosed and that because like those other sites, they're locked up. They're for doctors and RNs and that, not for, like it's not patient friendly. So I think that's kind of what we're, JD's
Yeah.
trying to do for us.
Yeah.
Let me finish this discussion.
Yeah, then because we're going to have the panel and then we can do questions. That's great. Okay. So the other thing that we know from the analytics is that people come about 3.6 pages per visit and they spend about 5 minutes. The reason they spend 5 minutes is we do a lot of podcasting. So the podcast lasts 20 minutes or so. So they maybe come to listen to the podcast. You can download them as well. So. But the interesting thing, I'll tell you a little bit about using data to fine-tune what we do. When we first started, we had a blog that the news came going down. So you only had on the screen 2 or 3 articles. And about a year into it, we redesigned the front page to look like a newspaper. So we had the ability to cross-check and cross-sell and get people to click on other stories. So we went from 45 seconds to about 3.5 minutes. Oh, no, I'm sorry, from 1 page to about 3.6 pages average. And that's a good thing because we know that people are getting more information every time they come. And we're trying to figure out how to make it even more interactive and more so we can show the kind of stories up in the front page so you know they're there once you see them. These are our target audiences. This is who we target. And I'll do a caveat on this because some of these audiences are very expensive to reach. So we try to do it in a, sort of in an organic way. So when you talk about, general media outlets and PR type activities with acromegaly or pituitary disease stories, that gets into, now we're competing with general public other noise that's being thrown at them. But we've also looked at the type of specialty, medical specialty that comes in contact or could potentially come in contact and should be aware. Ophthalmologists and dentists and dental hygienists and nurse practitioners and optometrists, all sorts of patient support groups, obviously pharmaceutical company websites, anything that we can put a link to, we try to do. There's probably others, so these are the ones that mental health and psychiatrists and psychologists critical. We have, our data shows that our stories, we get at least 3 times the attention when we put a mental health or emotional health story than we do anything else. It's pretty amazing when you see it. We have a few contributors that are mental health and emotional health, and the hits go up. So we try to use those to cross-sell things, so you can get from the mental health story to other important information. The short of it is we're learning as we go. We really weren't sure how this was going to work. I remember sitting down with Dr. Blevins and Dr. Sandeep Kunwar, who's the neurosurgeon at UCSF, and they asked me, well, how do you do this? Well, we start, and then we're going to learn, and then we'll just adapt as we go, and hopefully get as much collaboration as possible. And the more people that are working with us, the more brains, the better it is, because we can learn faster. So the magazine is basically, I call it a website, a web-style magazine, and obviously it's a blog. And it's fashioned as a news clearinghouse, and that means that we take existing news, important news, and repackage it a little bit and stick it in there, maybe one paragraph and a half, I think is what Deanna was saying. And so if you want to read more, there's more information, but at least you have a headline that tells you something about what's in that paper and why it is important. We support it by social media and extensive SEO programs. SEO is a way to get the website to show up higher when people are searching. We do opinion editorials. We have opinions about things. We've been working on a bunch of different stories, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what those stories are, just in case you feel that you have some information on it, or you would like to collaborate with us on some of that. That would be great. And then we are strict adherence in terms of what are approved and science methods. One of the things that we've been dealing with is a lot of misinformation, as you know, and online, and we've published a few things about it, but I think it's something that as a group we need to deal with, because many people get very misinformed and sometimes they hurt themselves. So this is what I was talking about a little earlier, which is it's a very simple process when you think of how do you go from communication to interest and how interest leads to engagement, and how engagement leads to better informed people, and how better informed people lead to lower numbers of undiagnosed. Because again, our thought is that if you have the information on the disease, maybe you'll mention it to your doctor earlier than, and the doctor may put it sooner in the list of possibilities. So it's a very simple, in the advertising world, in the old style communications agencies, that was the thing. You have to sort of distill everything into 1 or 2 little sentences and come up with a slogan that's going to do something big. So it's almost, it gets into your DNA after you work many, many years on that. It's about how to make things simple, easy to communicate so people get it fast, and then you get interest to go and to find out something else. Anyway. So the impact of it is not just about awareness, but it is about what impact that awareness has. And so it's obviously extremely important to tell the story about pituitary disease. But how we communicate it is critical. We always chat about, the pictures that we see in the media, the bias that exists in the media. So when I was diagnosed with acromegaly, and somebody says, well, Andrew the Giant has this, and I'm going, you're kidding me. That was the farthest thing that I thought I had. And if that's, because I thought, I know acromegaly, I know Andrew the Giant. And I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, if that's all we're talking about, then people don't know that you and I and everybody in this room that looks, like not Andrew the Giant can have acromegaly. So we're doing a disservice, in my opinion, by just continually talking about the extreme cases and not saying to people, this is something that one morning you're going to get up and your hip is going to hurt and you're going to go to your orthopedic surgeon and he's going to say, I think you have acromegaly and then you need to get seen, because that's exactly what happened to me. And that was the farthest thing from that I thought it was like a bucket of cold water. I'm sure I've talked to many of you, and we all have the same experience. I'm not going to bore you with it. But my point is that information has to generate attention. Otherwise, it's just more noise, and we have plenty of that. There's absolutely too much noise. So the issue is, how do we do this so we break through and people pay attention? And it's not. This is something that I think the more people we get involved in this and think about it and do it in a collaborative way, the more effective we're going to be and the faster it's going to happen. So these are a little bit about who we work with. All patient and advocacy groups and websites and blogs. We use search engine through Google. We do mainly Google searches. We're in social media, so you can get us through Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And then we work with a lot of the professional trade directories and are trying to break through to mainstream media by working on a few ideas with speakers bureaus and institutions that can get us some attention in the national media. We're also members of this organization called the World Alliance of Pituitary Organizations. I know Deanna's a member and Jill is too. Actually the three of us just started working with them. So we're trying to figure out how to get our message overseas to more people. And I think one of the key issues with pituitary disease is this. We have to figure out a way how to get to the really need areas. When you talk about countries like India and Africa, countries in Africa, there's a tremendous need for knowledge and awareness and information. So right now there's 36 member organizations from around 27 countries. That's about 38% of the total population. And it's a patient advocate support organization. So they're working. They're still in an organizing phase, but they're working very hard to make sure that they can get more patient advocates from all over the world so we can share the information that we have and what we know, so they can do their job better. So here's a few ideas of the work that we are doing, in some of it that we're trying to do in 2019. And I'm not going to go through it, but I wanted to share with you. Are we doing on time? 5 more minutes. Okay. So this is available, so just please read it. These are some of the ideas that we have that we've been working on. One of the things that I'm really excited about, I'll just tell you, is this idea of doing a roundtable discussion. We're trying to do it like the Sunday morning political where we go into a television studio, we get 3 or 4 experts around the table, and we do it a la Charlie Rose. I hate to use his name, but thank you for but do it like he did. He was one of the best, by the way, interviewers I've ever seen. So something that's great to watch, and there's a lot of information, and it's you're not sitting, in a it's a television show. It's like a news information show. So we're working on that. And then we're working on language editions, and that's proven. We've been working on it for about a year and a half. That's proven to be a hell of a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, because we can't translate it. We can't use Google Translate for this. But it's an exciting project. And then we have some, sort of potential articles. And I know some of the information that was mentioned by the presentations before, but so we're working on these articles. These are in development. So if you have any thoughts or I'd be happy to send you this. Please, reach out. We're working on artificial intelligence and how this pituitary disease diagnosis and management could benefit from that. I'm not sure what the answer is. Then another idea was to work on how sharing ideas can promote inspiration and creativity. And does actually Facebook do a good job of doing that because people are sharing? So is there a way to get all the information that's on Facebook from people interacting with it and say, okay, here's some really great ideas of things that we could do? There's also been some work done on how do we define value. What brings value to pituitary patients? If I say, well, if you were to rank what things bring value to you? Is it, cheaper medications? Is it more research? What is it? So that's something that we would like to talk to you about and think more about how we solve that. Let's see, and I'll go through this really quickly. We're working on a podcast or video on a day in a pituitary center to show people what is it like. That people that don't have pituitary disease. Okay, when you go to a pituitary, what do they do, and how interesting it is. Let's see. Orphan drugs. We're trying to also explain to our readers what an orphan drug, what the Orphan Act is, and how does it work, which is kind of a mystery, but it's a different story. But the orphan drug is a drug act in the United States that gives incentives to pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs for rare diseases. It's very interesting. And how do we energize more people? How do we engage more people? That's another thing that we're struggling with in understanding. Why is it that so many people are not engaging and trying to get self-help? Which is not really the case, but why is it that they're not engaging? Telemedicine is something else that we're looking at because it's so critical to get pituitary specialists to areas that are difficult to get to. So that's in pituitary disease. I think that's a huge product for people that have to travel to pituitary centers to get care and with specialists. Let's see. More on nutrition and exercise and how that impacts health. More on genetics. I'll tell you a funny story and then I'll get off the stage so we can do the question and answer. But a bunch of years ago, I met on the phone Dr. Marta Corbinitz. And if you haven't heard of Dr. Corbinitz, she's a geneticist and professor at St. Bartholomew's in England. And I have a first cousin in Argentina that's my age that has acromegaly too. So I immediately panicked and Dr. Brown said, we met Dr. Corbinitz. She was just at UCSF. Here's her number. Send us. So I sent her my DNA sample. And 2 years later, we were in a conference in Chicago, and we were at the And I hear this voice come back behind me and says, "I know you intimately." And when I turned around, I recognized her immediately. She's a wonderful person, and she's doing some amazing research on the AIP gene. And I encourage you to go to the website and type Martha Corbinitz and look at her articles and her work, because she's quite a lady, and she's doing very important work. And we're hoping to do more of that and get it to think people. I think it's interesting about genetics what we don't know. So I'll leave it at that. And that's it. If it's any other questions, I'm happy to answer any questions now, or we can get into the chairs. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And please get involved.